Hello, miladies of inestimable value. Power isn't always loud, it's the silence that forces others to trip over their own words. For centuries, psychologists have studied how male behavior shifts in the presence of different types of women. Here's a fact that will make you sit up. Men unconsciously alter their body language, tone, and even decision-making patterns when they encounter a woman whose presence doesn't beg for validation but commands it without effort. That woman is the Sigma female. She doesn't announce herself, yet she leaves men fumbling, second-guessing, and sometimes, hilariously, trying to man up in ways that only expose their insecurities. If you've ever noticed men suddenly recalibrating their stories, over-explaining their choices, or laughing a little too hard at jokes that weren't even that funny, chances are you've just walked them straight into the Sigma test. And today, we're about to uncover the exact male behaviors that confirm whether or not you are that Sigma female. The quiet storm men can't prepare for but can never forget. Number 1. He treats silence like a test. When a Sigma female enters a conversation, silence stops being just silence. To most people, it's nothing more than a pause. But in her presence, men begin to feel it as a test they can't escape. Suddenly, that simple gap between words feels like a heavy weight pressing on their chest, demanding they do something, anything, to prove they're not failing. The Sigma doesn't ask questions or pressure anyone to talk, she just lets the quiet hang there, and that's when things get interesting. Men who thrive on charm or dominance aren't used to that kind of stillness. They're used to filling rooms with their voice, expecting women to lean in, laugh, or respond with eagerness. But when they're faced with a Sigma female's silence, their rhythm is thrown completely off balance. Some start rambling, trying to patch up the silence with words that make less and less sense the longer they go on. They'll tell stories with too many details, crack jokes that fall flat, or even start repeating themselves without realizing it. The more they talk, the more obvious it becomes that they're not in control. They're scrambling to avoid looking insignificant in front of her. Others go in the opposite direction. Instead of rambling, they freeze, acting like the silence is a chess move they don't know how to counter. They stiffen up, cross their arms, or suddenly become overly serious, as if by holding their tongue they can prove they're not rattled. But their body language betrays them. The tapping foot, the tightened jaw, the quick glance to check if she's still paying attention. They want to look calm, but it's clear they're calculating every second. The brilliance of this moment is that the Sigma doesn't do it intentionally. She's not trying to trap anyone. Her silence is natural. It comes from being self-contained, not desperate for noise to validate her presence. But to men, it feels like being graded on a test they didn't study for. The quiet exposes them, stripping away rehearsed confidence and leaving only raw insecurity or genuine composure. That's why silence around a Sigma female isn't empty. It's the stage where men reveal exactly who they are without her saying a single word. Number 2. He questions his own leadership role. When most men walk into a room, they assume leadership is theirs to take. They expect people to naturally look to them for direction, laugh at their jokes, and follow their cues. But when a Sigma female is present, that confidence doesn't feel as solid as it usually does. Without saying anything, she forces men to question whether their role as leader is real authority or just an act they've gotten away with because no one challenged it. A Sigma female carries a kind of independence that doesn't orbit around male approval, and that alone disrupts the balance. Men are used to women either resisting leadership in obvious ways or falling in line without a second thought. The Sigma does neither. She doesn't compete for dominance, but she also doesn't hand it over. She simply exists outside of the hierarchy, and that makes men wonder if the power they hold is genuine or fragile. This shift is subtle but undeniable. A man who normally takes charge might start explaining himself more than usual, trying to justify his decisions as if seeking silent approval. Others become overly cautious, second-guessing their words or backing down from making bold statements. It's not that the Sigma female openly challenges them. It's that her presence makes them aware that someone in the room doesn't automatically buy into their performance. That silent refusal to be impressed can shake even the most self-assured men. On the flip side, some men react by trying harder to prove their dominance. They might interrupt more, raise their voice, or exaggerate their confidence. But the more they push, the more obvious it becomes that they're performing rather than leading. What they don't realize is that true leadership doesn't need to be forced, and around a Sigma, forced energy feels exposed and hollow. The real weight of this dynamic is that the Sigma female doesn't need to claim power for herself. She creates an atmosphere where the difference between authentic leadership and shallow posturing is impossible to hide. Men who are genuinely grounded can hold their own, while those who rely on bluster and control suddenly find their authority slipping through their hands. Number 3. He feels the need to justify his decisions. Men rarely notice how often they justify themselves until they're standing in front of a Sigma female. With most women, they can toss out a decision and move on without a second thought. But in her presence, something shifts. Suddenly, even the simplest choice, what drink he ordered, what job he's chasing, why he skipped the gym, comes with a detailed explanation he didn't plan to give. It's not because she asked, she didn't. It's because her silence feels like an X-ray. And he panics at the thought of looking careless under it. This behavior is less about respect and more about self-preservation. A Sigma female projects an aura that says, "I don't need your story to believe or disbelieve you." And that unnerves men who are used to their words being enough. They start stacking reasons, layering excuses, and building a defense around their decisions, hoping she'll read their logic as competence. The irony is that the more they explain, the more they expose their insecurity. What makes this dynamic fascinating is how unintentional it is on her part. She doesn't interrogate, she doesn't press, she doesn't roll her eyes or demand clarity. She simply listens or doesn't, and that stillness becomes unbearable for men who thrive on constant validation. They don't want her to think they're sloppy, careless, or shallow. They want to prove that they know what they're doing, even if deep down they're not entirely sure. It's a subtle power shift. Instead of him holding the stage, he finds himself auditioning. And every justification, every nervous explanation is really him saying, "Please don't see through me." The Sigma female doesn't humiliate or expose him. She doesn't need to. His own urge to justify reveals exactly what he's hiding. Number 4. He adjusts his masculinity dial. Men perform masculinity all the time, though most don't realize it. The chest puffing, the exaggerated toughness, the overplayed jokes about dominance, it's part of a script they've been taught since boyhood. Around most people, that act goes unchecked because it works. It draws laughs, attention, or at least quiet approval. But when a Sigma female enters the picture, something instinctive happens. That script suddenly feels flimsy, and he starts adjusting it, often without even knowing why. It's like his inner radar warns him, gimmicks won't land here. She isn't impressed by loud gestures or cartoonish displays of power, and deep down, he senses it. So instead of going bigger, he tones it down. The voice softens, the posture relaxes. He trades the exaggerated swagger for something that looks more natural. What he's really doing is scrambling to show a version of masculinity that won't look cheap under her watchful silence. This shift is both subtle and fascinating. Around other women, the same man might brag about money, flex his muscles, or overstate his importance. But in front of a Sigma female, those moves feel too obvious, almost childish. He realizes instinctively that if he leans on surface-level bravado, she'll see right through it, and worse, she won't care. That's the sting, not rejection, but indifference. Nothing bruises male pride more than realizing his best tricks don't even register on her radar. So he starts experimenting with something closer to real confidence. Instead of pretending to be untouchable, he leans into subtler signals, measured eye contact, calmer speech, quieter certainty. He tries to project steadiness instead of flash. Some men pull it off, revealing a maturity that was buried under layers of performance. Others, though, stumble. They overshoot, and the adjustment looks awkward, like a mask slipping but not fully removed. What's remarkable here is that the Sigma female doesn't tell him to change. She doesn't demand authenticity, she just is, and her presence naturally strips away the parts of masculinity that don't hold weight. Around her, a man either finds a deeper, truer version of himself, or gets exposed as someone who doesn't have one. Number 5, he becomes careful with humor. Humor is often a man's go-to weapon. It breaks tension, wins attention, and creates a sense of dominance without confrontation. With most women, light banter or shallow jokes are enough to spark laughter and keep the energy flowing. But when a Sigma female is around, that same formula doesn't land. She isn't dazzled by cheap one-liners or forced punchlines, and men sense it instantly. That's when they start becoming careful with humor, whether they realize it or not. The shift is subtle at first. He pauses before cracking a joke, filtering it in his head to make sure it won't sound juvenile. He might even abandon it altogether if it feels like it won't hold weight in her presence. This hesitation reveals the pressure she puts on him without saying a word. He knows instinctively that shallow humor won't impress her. It will only expose how dependent he is on tricks for attention. Some men attempt to sharpen their wit, crafting jokes that carry more intelligence, more edge, more thought. They aim for humor that reflects confidence rather than neediness. But others stumble, second-guessing themselves so much that they lose their natural flow. Their usual rhythm of tossing out quips and waiting for validation disappears, and they find themselves quiet, searching for the kind of humor that won't make them look like fools in her eyes. What's striking is how unintentional her influence is. The Sigma female doesn't demand intellectual humor, nor does she mock shallow attempts. She simply doesn't feed them. She won't fake a laugh to soothe male ego, and that refusal forces men to raise the quality of their delivery or retreat into silence. For men used to being the funny guy, that silence can feel unbearable. It's as if their entire social currency has suddenly been devalued. In this space, humor stops being a cheap tool and becomes a test of authenticity. Men quickly realize that jokes rooted in insecurity or performance ring hollow, while humor born from genuine confidence actually lands. Around a Sigma female, comedy becomes less about winning attention and more about revealing whether he has depth beneath the act. And that realization alone unsettles men who rely on laughs to prove their worth. Number 6, he reverts to boy mode. When men encounter a Sigma female, many of their usual strategies fall apart. The practiced confidence, the polished charm, the subtle flexes of status, none of it seems to stick. And when those masks fail, something unexpected often shows up: boy mode. Instead of standing firm in their masculinity, some men slide backward into a childish version of themselves. It's not intentional, but it's their nervous system's way of coping with the pressure she creates without even trying. Boy mode usually looks playful at first, teasing, poking fun, or acting silly in a way that feels out of sync with their age. On the surface, it might come across as light-hearted, but underneath, it's a signal of insecurity. He's trying to soften the space between them, almost as if to say, "Don't judge me too harshly. I'm harmless." It's a retreat into boyish antics because the man in him doesn't feel solid enough to hold up under her quiet scrutiny. The humor shifts, too. Instead of clever or confident jokes, it becomes more about attention-seeking quips, almost like the class clown who desperately wants to be noticed. He tests boundaries, pushes little provocations, and waits to see how she reacts. This behavior isn't about genuine play. It's a clumsy attempt to regain some form of control in a dynamic where he senses he doesn't have any. What makes this fascinating is how revealing it is. Boy mode strips away the performance of the alpha or the cool, detached act of the beta. It shows the raw nervousness underneath, the man who isn't sure if he measures up, so he reverts to the comfort of boyish patterns where the stakes feel lower. But instead of looking charming, it often makes him appear smaller, like he's abandoned the strength he was trying so hard to project. The Sigma female doesn't reward or punish this regression. She doesn't need to. Her presence alone makes the cracks visible. And in those cracks, a man either sees where he needs to grow, or he stays stuck in the loop of acting like a boy every time he feels outclassed by a woman who refuses to play his games. Number 7, he avoids eye contact too long or holds it too hard. Eye contact is one of the simplest human gestures, yet it reveals more than words ever could. Around a Sigma female, it becomes a battlefield. Men suddenly find themselves overthinking something they normally do without effort. Some can't hold her gaze for long, dodging her eyes like they might give away a secret they're not ready to reveal. Others go to the opposite extreme, locking in too hard, determined to prove they're unaffected, when in reality, they're trying to convince themselves more than her. Either way, the balance is broken. When a man avoids her eyes, it's rarely about disinterest. It's about exposure. He senses that her gaze isn't casual. It penetrates, weighs, and registers things he'd rather keep hidden. Looking away becomes a defense mechanism, a way to keep her from peeling back layers he isn't confident about. Yet the very act of avoiding eye contact betrays his discomfort, making it obvious he's unsettled. On the flip side, some men overcompensate. They hold eye contact too long, trying to project dominance or show they're not intimidated. But it backfires. Instead of looking strong, it comes across as forced, almost theatrical, like a performance he's desperate to get right. The Sigma female doesn't need to break the stare or respond aggressively. Her calm composure exposes his intensity as overdone. His need to prove something only confirms that he feels tested. The irony is that the Sigma female isn't consciously playing games with her eyes. She isn't challenging or interrogating. Her gaze carries the weight of someone who sees without needing to speak, and men sense that difference instantly. They realize it's not about flirtation, power play, or intimidation. It's about her unshakable presence, which makes them hyper-aware of themselves. This is why eye contact with a Sigma female feels different. It's not just a glance, it's a mirror. Men either shrink away from what they fear she'll notice or push too hard, trying to prove they're unshaken. But both reactions reveal the same truth. Her presence alone is enough to disturb the balance they usually take for granted. Number 8. He shows competitive courtesy. When most men want to assert themselves, they lean on obvious displays of dominance, talking louder, taking up more space, or steering the conversation. But around a Sigma female, those tactics feel clumsy. They sense that overt posturing won't get them far, so they pivot. Instead of raw dominance, they switch to a polished performance, competitive courtesy. It's still about proving power, but it's dressed up in the language of gentlemanliness. This is the man who rushes to open the door, but does it with a glance that says, "See how considerate I am?" He'll let you speak first in a group, but not without making sure everyone notices his restraint. He might even step back to give you space, while simultaneously ensuring the gesture is recognized as an act of control rather than genuine kindness. On the surface, it looks like good manners, but beneath it, there's a quiet competition playing out. The Sigma female disrupts men because she doesn't reward theatrics, yet men still crave her acknowledgement. Competitive courtesy is their compromise. It allows them to appear refined and controlled while still fighting for validation. They're not trying to dominate her outright, but they're certainly not being selfless either. Every action is a performance, carefully measured to communicate, "I am powerful enough to choose restraint." The irony is that true courtesy doesn't need to prove itself, and the Sigma female can sense the difference immediately. She sees when a man's politeness comes from confidence and when it's just another mask for insecurity. This is why competitive courtesy, though clever, often backfires. Instead of impressing her, it highlights his need to be noticed, his inability to just act without needing credit. What makes this dynamic fascinating is how easily men give themselves away. They believe they're showing maturity, but the Sigma female recognizes it as a subtler form of dominance play. She doesn't have to call it out or reject it. Her quiet indifference is enough to strip the performance of its power. And once again, the man finds himself caught in a loop, trying harder to impress, only to reveal even more of the insecurity he hoped to hide. Number 9. He reassesses his circle in real time. When a Sigma female enters the picture, she doesn't just disrupt men individually. She shakes up the entire mental landscape of how they view women in general. Without saying a word, she becomes a silent benchmark. Men find themselves reassessing their circle in real time, comparing the women they usually surround themselves with against the standard she represents. It's not a conscious decision. It happens almost instantly, like an involuntary recalibration. The shift is often uncomfortable. Men who were perfectly content with the women in their lives suddenly see cracks in the foundation. The loud attention seekers start to feel exhausting. The agreeable ones seem hollow. Even the ambitious ones can appear performative when measured against the Sigma's natural self-possession. She doesn't demand comparison. Her very presence creates it. And men realize, often with quiet frustration, how much mediocrity they've accepted because it was easier, safer, or more socially convenient. This reassessment can spark both admiration and resentment. On one hand, they're drawn to her depth, independence, and refusal to play by tired scripts. On the other, it unsettles them because it forces a truth they'd rather not face. Their standards weren't as high as they thought. She exposes, without effort, the compromises they've made in relationships and the excuses they've used to justify them. What makes this moment powerful is its permanence. Once a man sees the contrast, he can't unsee it. Even if he doesn't pursue her, even if he dismisses her as too much or different, the awareness lingers. Every interaction with other women now carries the faint echo of that Sigma presence, a reminder that settling is a choice, not inevitability. Some men step up, realizing they need to refine what they seek. Others retreat, resentful of the new standard she set simply by existing. The Sigma female doesn't enter rooms to compete. She doesn't undermine or diminish anyone else. But her authenticity, her refusal to bend for validation, makes the average suddenly look painfully average. And in that quiet comparison, men are left questioning not just the women around them, but also themselves, and why they tolerated so little for so long. Number 10. He gets awkward about compliments. Complimenting women is one of the oldest tools in a man's playbook. It's simple, reliable, and usually guarantees at least a smile or a softened response. But with a Sigma female, that tool suddenly feels blunt. Men find themselves hesitating, unsure if giving a compliment will make them look genuine or desperate. The uncertainty creates a strange tension. They want to acknowledge her presence, but they also don't want to reveal how badly they want her validation. That inner conflict is where the awkwardness spills out. Some men try to push through it anyway, but it rarely comes out clean. The compliment might be too formal, too stiff, or over-delivered, like they're rehearsing, rather than speaking naturally. Others second-guess themselves so much that the words die in their throat, and what should have been effortless instead becomes an awkward silence. A few even go the opposite route, tossing out backhanded or half-joking compliments in a clumsy attempt to hide their nervousness. In every case, the Sigma female has disrupted what is normally a smooth, automatic tactic. The root of the awkwardness is this. Men know a Sigma female doesn't need external validation, so offering it feels risky. With most women, a compliment is a currency. They give, she accepts, and it buys them rapport. But with a Sigma, there's no guarantee she'll even acknowledge the gesture. She might simply nod, change the subject, or not react at all. That lack of predictable reward unsettles men because it strips the compliment of its usual power. What's even more revealing is how the hesitation itself exposes their need. By pausing, overthinking, or fumbling, they're silently admitting that her opinion of them carries weight. They're afraid of looking like they're reaching for approval, but their discomfort already confirms it. And the Sigma female doesn't have to call it out. She just lets the tension hang, making them even more self-conscious. In the end, compliments around a Sigma female stop being harmless pleasantries and turn into subtle confessionals. Whether spoken awkwardly or withheld altogether, they reveal the man's inner struggle. Does he admire her freely, or does he secretly fear that admiration puts him beneath her? Either way, she's exposed more than he intended without lifting a finger. Number 11. He protects his ego like it's fragile glass. A man's ego is usually his shield. It protects him from embarrassment, rejection, and the sting of not being enough. Most of the time, he can brush off indifference or even outright criticism by telling himself it doesn't matter. But when he's dealing with a Sigma female, that shield suddenly feels paper-thin. Around her, his ego becomes fragile glass. Every small crack of indifference, every subtle correction, every moment of being overlooked cuts deeper than it should. The strange part is that she never asks for this power. She doesn't demand respect, she doesn't seek authority, and she doesn't hover over people's decisions. Yet her presence carries an unspoken weight. Men sense instinctively that her perception of them matters in ways they can't fully explain. If she approves, it feels like an unearned victory. If she doesn't react, it feels like a quiet dismissal they can't shake off. Even silence becomes loaded, as though she's holding a verdict without uttering a word. This is why small things escalate in his mind. A casual shrug, a neutral tone, or a lack of visible reaction can sting more than open rejection. And if she ever corrects him, whether it's a fact he got wrong, a slip in logic, or a careless assumption, he feels it far more sharply than if anyone else had pointed it out. It's not just about the correction itself, it's about who it's coming from. Her grounded authority makes it land like a strike to his pride. What makes this dynamic so brutal is how unavoidable it is. A Sigma female doesn't go out of her way to wound or inflate anyone's ego. She simply exists in her own truth. But men who measure their worth by external validation feel exposed. They either bend over backward to keep her approval intact, or grow defensive, trying to downplay her influence while quietly obsessing over it. Both reactions betray the same reality. They can't ignore the weight she carries, even though they never agreed to give it to her. Her power isn't in breaking egos on purpose. It's in showing men just how fragile those egos already were. Around her, the mask of confidence shatters easily, and what's left is the raw truth of whether their self-worth is real or just borrowed from how others see them. Number 12. He starts copying your pacing. One of the most revealing things men do around a Sigma female is shift into her rhythm without even noticing it. They start copying her pacing, whether it's how fast or slow she walks, the calm tone she speaks with, or even the way she pauses before making a point. At first it's subtle, almost invisible, but the more time they spend near her, the clearer it becomes. They're no longer moving on their own timing. They've started orbiting her energy instead of holding their own. This isn't conscious mimicry. He doesn't wake up thinking, I'll match her steps today. It happens on a deeper, instinctive level. Human beings naturally mirror those they respect or feel affected by. Around most people, men keep their own rhythm, pushing their personality forward as the one that sets the tone. But with a Sigma female, that default setting collapses. Something about her composure, her calm independence, her refusal to be rushed or dragged along forces men to adapt. The effect can be unsettling for them. Men who are used to being the center of gravity suddenly feel like satellites, adjusting themselves around a stronger force. A man who normally dominates conversations might slow his speech, choosing words more carefully. Another might find himself walking a step behind her instead of ahead, as if his body instinctively understands who carries the true weight of presence. It's not submission, it's gravitational pull. The fascinating part is that she never asks for this alignment. She doesn't demand anyone follow her lead, nor does she flaunt control. Her consistency, however, creates an invisible standard. Men either sync with it or risk looking chaotic by comparison. And once they've started matching her, they rarely realize how much they've shifted until it's too late to deny it. This mirroring is more than body language. It's a confession. It exposes the fact that their own center isn't as solid as they believed. The Sigma female doesn't chase validation, but she ends up with it anyway, not through manipulation, but through presence. By the time a man has adjusted his walk, his tone, or his pace to hers, he's already admitted, silently, that she is the one setting the rhythm. A Sigma female isn't defined by how loudly she asserts herself or how many people orbit her presence. Her power is quiet, subtle, and undeniable, so much so that men reveal more about themselves than she ever does. From the way they justify their decisions to how they adjust their masculinity, tiptoe around silence, or offer unnecessary help, every action becomes a reflection of the impact she naturally carries. She exposes insecurities, unsettles confidence, and forces recalibration without a single demand. Being around a Sigma female is like holding up a mirror to a man's ego, habits, and instincts. She doesn't manipulate, she doesn't compete, and she doesn't chase approval, but her presence alone compels men to reassess themselves, their choices, and even their understanding of power and attraction. Every awkward compliment, every attempted display of wit, every mirroring of her rhythm is a silent confession. They recognize the depth, independence, and authenticity they're confronting, and they can't ignore it. This is why Sigma females are both magnetic and disarming. They don't need to prove value because their essence communicates it effortlessly. Men may try to impress, to assert, to charm, or to control, but in the end, it's their own reactions, vulnerabilities, and recalibrations that tell the real story. Her influence is invisible yet undeniable, shaping the room and everyone in it without uttering a single demand. If you recognize these behaviors in the men around you, it's a confirmation of something extraordinary. Your presence matters not because you command it, but because you embody it. You are a Sigma female, self-contained, authentic, and profoundly affecting the world in ways that most will never consciously see, but will instinctively respond to. To anyone watching, this isn't just a list of observations. It's a map of influence, a guide to understanding why a Sigma female changes everything around her without needing to try. Her power is quiet, but it resonates louder than anything else. If you found these insights powerful and want to uncover more about Sigma females and the subtle ways they shape the world around them, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Like this video if it opened your eyes, comment below with the behaviors you've noticed in men around you, and share it with friends who need to see this truth. Your support helps us bring even more brutally honest, unique, and extraordinary content straight to you, so don't hold back.